Hello, welcome to Shad Life. I have my 165 millimeter cranks in my hand. I had a lot of fun doing this experiment on Zwift. I put the video up, but I want to do a little recap here because I just know most people on YouTube aren't necessarily going to want to watch me for 22 minutes on the trainer playing around with crank arm length. So let's talk about the, what I learned here. Super stoked that I did this because I learned a lot. Couple of things to keep in mind here. On the trainer, I'm seated the entire time, so this test isn't going to cover what it's like standing and pedaling on the cranks. And then what I did is I did a lap of what's called jungle loop, and I did it on gravel with a mountain bike and Zwift. So the mountain bikes and Zwift work better on gravel than the road bikes, but about probably not as good as the gravel bikes. But I was on a mountain bike in real life. My Hayduk tie, so I wanted to do a mountain bike in the game and then do the same course. I wanted to do 2 laps, one with the 165 millimeter crank. Then I did a pit stop, swapped the cranks, and then did a lap with the 170 millimeter cranks. So if you haven't watched the video, uh, I beat my 165 crank lap by 13 seconds. Now in the course of 1.9 miles, which is what that lap is, that's a significant time difference. There are a couple of things that might have kind of influenced me to go a little harder on the 170 millimeter cranks. When I started, my 165 rider got out ahead of me quicker, and in the game, once I did my 165 lap, I had the Ghost Rider, which was a visual rider out there for me to do when I did my, or to follow when I did my 170 lap. So once I saw the Ghost Rider out ahead of me, I was pushing harder to like keep up with it. And so I actually got out of and going much quicker with the 165s. And so I kind of had a little bit of a gap there. But then once that initial gap happened, I was kind of equal pace to the 165 millimeter Ghost Rider. And then as I got into the climb, I slowly started reeling the Ghost Rider in. And then I passed the Ghost Rider in, and then that's when I started to really make the gap and get pretty far ahead of the Ghost Rider. So um, the 170 millimeter cranks were definitely faster, and I definitely felt like I was able to put out more watts. I could see the watts during the climb. I was running at about 80 RPM with the 170s and putting around 250 watts. With these, I was running close to 88, 89 RPM and putting out about 230 watts. Um, so that was where I kind of reeled in and then uh, pulled away from my Ghost Rider on that climb. And then I thought that the 165s were going to kind of catch me a bit on the downhill. Um, but even on the downhill, I kept pulling away from my Ghost Rider. Um, I was still able to pedal and put out more watts with the longer cranks. So that was interesting. That wasn't what I was expecting was going to happen, especially being that I'm seated the whole time. I thought that I'd be able to spin and really, hammer with these cranks, but the 170s, I just had that much more leverage. Um, Couple of things that I will note with the 165 is they actually felt better, physically felt better on my body. I'm making smaller circles, and I was quite surprised at the difference in how these felt compared to the 170s, considering that's only 5 millimeters. We're talking, you know, something about that size difference on each thing. So it comes out to be 10 millimeters when you add both cranks together. So you're making you know, a 10 millimeter diameter bigger circle than you are with the 165 cranks. So um, I it just felt more comfortable to have the shorter crank arms. And then when I went to the 170s, I could feel a little bit. I can't feel much in my left knee because that's where I had my knee replacement. But my right knee, I could definitely feel the strain on my knee with the longer cranks. I definitely could have probably spent more time making sure the seat was perfectly adjusted, and maybe it needs to be on the rails differently or something, who knows. But I definitely felt that I was putting more strain on my legs with the 170s. Um, and most of that is because you have to make bigger movements with your legs. Your knee has to come higher, your leg has to go down further and things. So I definitely had to change my seat height. When I put the 165s on, I had to raise my seat. And then when I went back to the 170s, I had to lower my seat back down. So you have to adjust your seat height. And when I raised my seat, it changed my cockpit a little bit. I'm a little more lean forward and so on and so forth. So thinking about that, and like with dropper posts, if you're used to your seat going down to a certain height when you're in the down position on the dropper post, well, if you run shorter cranks, you have to run your seat a little higher. Your dropper post isn't going to be as low. So keep that kind of stuff in mind, or you'll have to buy a new dropper post with a different, drop length to it. But uh, so it was super cool to do this experiment. I know not a lot of people are going to watch that video, but that's why I wanted to do this recap video to just kind of recap what it felt like. I'm not done here because that was seated, that was in Zwift. The speeds in Zwift, I was doing like 17, 18 miles per hour. That's why I realized right away that the 32 chainring wasn't going to work in Zwift because the speeds are too high. It was too easy to spin out when my hardest gear is 30-11. So I ran the 32 tooth on both cranksets to make things equal, and it worked a lot better. But on the trail, I feel like it's going to be a different ball game because my average speeds on single track are somewhere between 8 and 12 miles per hour. And we're not talking downhill here. We're just talking regular, flowy, tight single track. When I look at my average speeds, depending on how much climbing there is or whatever, on trails that tend to be a little flatter, sometimes they'll average around 11, 12 miles per hour. On hillier trails, I'll average more like 8, sometimes 9 miles per hour. So I think that the 30 tooth with 165s might do better, definitely in a real mountain biking single track situation. I don't know, but I'll definitely try that in the spring when I get on the trails. I'll run these and do some laps and see what I think. And I also want to try these on single speed. Just very curious. I'll throw these on my surly low side and see how that feels, and see if I like it. I'll run it with a little bit easier gearing and think more on the spin. They're definitely easier to spin. I was at higher RPMs with these. And then there's one more thing that I felt like was a weakness with the shorter cranks. When I come up to some of the tops of these hills and crest the hills, and there's a couple of times where you kind of crest the hill, get a little bit of down, and you start climbing again. That happens quite a bit. It happens in real life, definitely mountain biking. One of the things I like to do when I crest the hill is I like to shift into a harder gear and get up to speed as quickly as I can, and just power so I have more momentum going into the next climb, right? With these, I struggled to do that. I shifted into a harder gear and as I crested the hill, and then I was bogging down. So think like a manual transmission in a car, because I didn't have as much torque with these. If you shift in a manual transmission car too soon, it's going to bog the engine. Well, that's what I felt like when I shifted with these. So I had to learn to spin a bit faster and take a little bit longer after cresting the hill to get the RPMs up there and then shift. Well, because of that, I wasn't able to get up to as high of a speed and have as much momentum going into the next hill. So that's kind of a weakness of these that I didn't even think about or realize was going to be the case. But with the 170s, again, that small amount, I had that much more torque to be able to crest those hills and get speed. And then even on the downhill, I had more watts on the downhill and even pulled further in front of the 165. So that was interesting. I did not expect that to happen. Did not expect to have such a huge gap, 13 seconds on my 165 lap. It was pretty amazing. So I'm super stoked I tried this experiment. So more to come. I've got to get these out on the trail and try them out in real world, real mountain biking. So yeah, that'll be my plan. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.